unless you've been walking around with your head in the clouds, you're fairly aware that there are issues with the DWP. The only person who really denies this is Esther McVeigh. But the facts speak for themselves. The fact that we've had leaked reports coming out saying that the DWP have taken it onto themselves to clear people for work when it directly contradicts what medical professionals have said is repulsive. And then when you get into reports that the DWP have basically attacked people with physical disabilities that physically can't make the appointments the Department of Work and Pensions, the Job Centre, has set up, so they sanction them, which causes more stress. It's one horror story after the other. But this morning I read an article by Steve Topple over at the Canary, and I'll link it down below. You should definitely have a read. The headline is, the DWP just whitewashed the most damaging report in its history. That's a bold statement considering what I've just said, but reading through it, it gets so much worse. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will link it down below. But just little snippets. The Department of Work and Pensions whitewashed a damaging report from the UN, one that accused it of grave and systematic violations of disabled people's human rights. It goes on to say that the UN Committee of Rights of Persons with Disabilities has been investigating the UK government for several years. This accumulated in a 2016 report. So this doesn't count for the last 2 years, but it does cover almost the entirety of Ian Duncan Smith's reign as head of the DWP. And it just goes on to show how repulsive the conservative principles are when it comes to looking after the people who either have fallen on hard times or are the most vulnerable in our country. Now, this report goes on to say that the UN's Association, Article 19, the rights of living independently and be included in the community. Okay, the UN accuses the Department of Work and Pension of 5 things. Failing to recognise Article 19 in law as a human right to promote individual autonomy, control and choice. I want to stop just there for a second. I've been saying on this channel since it started, and I've been saying elsewhere for years, the Conservatives want to get rid of human rights. Now, I'm saying this because it's what they are saying. Dominic Raab constantly says it. Does not believe in human rights, wants to get rid of them. David Cameron said it. Theresa May has said it. Every high-ranking member of the Conservative Party have said the exact same thing in regards to human rights. They do not believe in them, they want to get rid of them. And here is just one example of them ignoring human rights. As a side note, leaving the EU is going to make it so much easier for them to completely ignore human rights in general. But let's get back to this. Number 2, implementing policies and measures that negatively affect disabled people's rights to Article 19. Now again, this is setting up things and appointments that people with disabilities, or some people with disabilities, cannot physically make, giving them goals that they cannot physically achieve. I work in social care. We do set goals out for the people we care for. but we are very, very aware of what these goals are, and we are very, very clear to make sure that they're achievable. One of my guys cannot cook a 4-course meal, so that will not be his goal. But getting him to the point where he can make his own breakfast, where he can make his own lunch, where he can assist in cooking dinner, those are, over time, achievable goals. That's not what the DWP have been doing. They've been setting unrealistic goals, setting people up to fail. A clear violation of human rights because it has a detrimental effect on a person. It is institutional abuse, discriminative abuse. And if that was going on in a care home, everyone responsible would be in prison for an incredibly long time. Okay, carrying on. Number 3. This gets harder and harder to read. Absolving itself of its responsibilities under Article 19, giving them to the devolved nations and local authority councils instead, but without providing appropriate and embarked budget allocations. So this is central government saying, hey, you've got Billy Bob down the road, he needs something, but we don't really care. So this is down to you. You now have to go sort out Billy Bob, but we're not actually going to give you the money to do it. Again, touching on a topic I commented on yesterday or the day before. The Conservatives are very, very happy to take money, and they're very, very happy to give it to the wealthiest in the country or to squander it on £70 lunch meals, but they are not willing to put it back into the country where it is needed. Number 4, allowing allowing the institutionalization of disabled people to continue. Sorry, I have too many teeth for such words so early in the morning. Okay, institutionalization is a massive thing in care, in social care. We are very, very clear in the language that we use. Technically, we are not supposed to use the word patients or residents because that's too institutionalized. We say service users because they use a service. Now we're starting to think that that's a little bit too men in white coats, and certainly the homes that I've worked in, we just call them the guys. It's that simple. But this comes down to another form of abuse. Painting everyone with the same brush and not giving them access to things that they need access to. A very dogmatic way of, well, I'd like to say of caring for people, but it doesn't work. And it's something that CQC, Care Quality Commissions, would go mental at if it was taking place in a care home. Number 5, overseeing a lack of support services and accessible public facilities for disabled people. How many stories have come out, not nationally, but just locally, of places shutting down that used to be open to everyone? Not just people with disabilities, but elderly people. Coffee mornings for single parents. We constantly hear that there is no funding for anything. Everything is being shut down. And what's the reality of it? The reality is the money is there. Council tax has gone up. Cost of everything has gone up. And yet what we've got has gone down. You can't say that it's because of wages, because wages have stagnated. They've not kept up with inflation. The majority of people are on minimum wage. that means they are worse off now than they were 30, 40 years ago. Hell, even 10 years ago. The money is there, but again, the Conservatives are not putting the money back into the country. They are lining their pockets in giving CEOs of massive companies tax breaks, of spending ridiculous monies on campaign finances, on absurd travel and food budget expenses. £70 a day for lunch is absurd. A lot of the care homes I've worked in, you can pay a token fee and you get to eat the food in the care home. Now the one I'm in now is £30. Personally, I don't pay into it because I work nights, so I'm not there during the day. I take my own food, it's not an issue. But if I was working days on a regular basis, then I would happily pay that £30 because that means I don't have to worry about food. £70 a day is obscene and is a grotesque finance violation. Now, it's not breaking the law in any technical stance, but if you're going to sit there and try to justify £70 on a lunch per day for these high-ranking members of parliament, I'm sorry, but you're just not in tune with reality. This article goes on, and it really is worth a read. But one of the numbers stuck out. So, it's going to be too far. I can't find it here. Okay, so between December 2011 and February, I believe it's 2013, possibly 2014. It will be in the article. Again, I'm linking that down below. Almost 2,000 people had died as a direct result of the DWP. Now, at that time, it was Ian Duncan Smith. That number should send a chill down your spine. Almost 2,000 people in such a short amount of time. Not because they were ill, not because some unbelievable mistake happened, but as a direct result of what I just read out. The DWP is responsible for so many suicides in this country. Now bear in mind that number, almost 2,000 people, that's just from December of 2011 to February 2013, possibly 2014. Since then, that number has gone up so damn high, I can't keep that number in my head because it's honestly just too depressing. How much more are the people going to have to endure before we finally put someone who actually wants to serve the country in that place? Esther McVey was not a valid replacement for Ian Duncan Smith. She is the catalyst of 4.1 million children in poverty right now. There have been so many suicides because of the Department of Work and Pensions. We found out that they have targeted goals for how many sanctions they can give. They are encouraged, incentivized to sanction people, essentially to stop people's money. And it doesn't save money for the government. It doesn't save money for local councils. The only thing it does is prove how little this government and the government before it actually cares about the people. This is a blatant attack, not just on the disabled in this country, but on everyone. Everyone who has any kind of affiliation with the DWP, anyone who's on any kind of benefit system. Doesn't have to be job seekers allowance, doesn't have to be universal credits. This report and how the Department of Work and Pensions have handled it is absolutely atrocious. Esther McVey was not there, was not running the show in the beginning. That was Ian Duncan Smith. He needs to be held accountable. But so does Esther McVey. Because since she took over, it has been cranked up to 11. This cannot be forgotten. This cannot be forgiven. This needs to be brought up every single day. Swarm her Twitter feed full of this story. Every single day until she is forced to acknowledge it. And then carry on. Because quite frankly, this is repulsive. I had to stop reading this article multiple times because I couldn't believe the depravity of the Conservative Party. I'm not advocating physical violence, of course I'm not. But definitely swarm her Twitter feed, her Facebook, her social media accounts, and Ian Duncan Smith's, and Theresa May, and David Cameron, and whoever takes over from Theresa May. Because this is the attitude of the Conservative Party. Take money from the poor, give it to the rich, and ignore the suffering and death that they spread.